via email within the next week. I would now like to introduce the moderator.
With unemployment continuing to hover near historic lows and the latest data from the Vistage CEO Confidence Index showing that 63% of small and mid-sized businesses plan to expand their workforce in the coming year, how you hire and retain top talent is so critical. But what fuels your ability to do these successfully is your culture. A recent Vistage report, Creating a Conscious Culture, revealed that 63% of leaders strongly agreed that culture was critical to their company's performance and success. Yet just 40% agreed that this was a priority, and only 11% were satisfied with their culture today. Culture is your organizational gravity and is foundational to how to attract and retain talent. Developing a talent and culture roadmap can help your company recruit and retain the people you need to achieve your business objectives. And so to provide you with perspectives on how to approach this very important topic, Kathleen Quinn Votaw from TalenTrust is our speaker today. Kathleen's 30 years of experience includes more than 10 years as a Vistage member and over 15 years as a CEO, all of which has helped her hone the insights she shares with executives on how to find and keep the most valuable asset, their people. As founder and CEO of the recruiting firm TalenTrust and author of the book Solve the People Puzzle, Kathleen's success is based on a core belief that people and relationships are critical to business success. As we proceed, please feel free to answer any questions in the questions area of your control panel, and we'll have Kathleen answer as many of those as she can at the end of the presentation. And for those that took the quiz in advance and have questions on your personalized report, please feel free to ask those questions as well. So Kathleen, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Wonderful. Good morning, my wonderful Vistage community. Those of you who have joined a webinar with me before, you know I like to pop in and say howdy. Hopefully you're all on the way to a nice little break with your family over the holidays. And I'm so excited to give you great content today. So Anne, thank you for introducing me. I'll pop off the webcam, then I'll pop back on when I pass it back to Anne at the end. We have an awful lot to cover. So let's rock and roll, and I'll focus on the content. So we have developed a fun new tool for you, our Vistage community, and for our clients around the country. So I'm happy to unveil the Talent and Culture Quiz from us, TalenTrust. If you haven't taken it already, the URL is embedded in this slide. It's talentrust.com/quiz. Easy, right? And so we've had many people take this quiz, and it gives you a wonderful report, a PDF report that tells you what you're doing well, effectively, where you might need some help, so we call it insufficient, and where you're failing. So I'm going to walk you through this tool today. There are quite a few people. We have over 100 people on this webinar. I want you all to go take it as a holiday Christmas gift to me and to you and to your company, because it will give you some really good actionable things to build your culture based on what Anne just said in our intro. So obviously, Colleen, our introducer, said that this deck is in the chat function. I'll also give you another way to get it as well. So make sure you get this deck and do something with the data. So let's go into more information. When usually we get report results for most of our presentations, we didn't get the results because obviously in Vistage all of our contact information is confidential. But I just wanted to show you the 9 different components that we report out on, and then I'm going to dive deeper into each one of these during our conversation today. So you can see when I present to either Vistage groups or outside of the Vistage community or to your company, we prepare a report for your environment, for your unique community. And so what we do is we give you some benchmarking. And this is from one of my last Vistage member presentations in St. Louis Obispo in California. So we had 8 people take the quiz, and you can see a lot of them felt they were strong and effective on culture, but some were struggling, they were insufficient. None were failing. So when I, as a speaker, come in or as a consultant come in, I can have this kind of report card on the health and wellness of your culture and your talent acquisition strategies. So it makes the conversation more meaty, as it will today. And so what we also find is where you're failing and where you're insufficient. And where you're failing and insufficient is where we spend the most of our time. Because if you're doing it right, great, keep doing it. If it ain't broke, why fix it, right? So look at the failing column. So this particular group was struggling with assessments. And we have a wonderful Vistage sponsor predictive index that you should look into that offers assessments. There's some other assessment tools that I will discuss with you during this webinar that you could look into. They were also struggling with onboarding. That was a big deal for them. Kind of once you get a great person into your community, into your company, what the heck do you do with them? Most people have an orientation, 1 week orientation plan, but really the best practice around onboarding is a 6-month assimilation plan. And I'll dig into that a little bit more as we go through each of these 9 factors. The third area you can see from this kind of mock-up report was compensation. And if anybody gets my blog, I wrote a blog and it's entitled, very originally, Don't Be Cheap. So go to TalenTrust.com and pull up that article on how not to be cheap. And there's all kinds of tools that can help you assess the fair and reasonable compensation in your geographic area and for the role and for the size of your company. Because we as Vistage members, we're all different. We're all different, we're all unique, we have different size companies, different industries. Make sure you're educated before you try to close the deal. So this just gives you a sense of how the results go back and forth. This first slide shows you what the report card looks like. You get your own personalized PDF. And then if I come to speak to your company or I come speak to your member group, you're going to get personalized where you're effective, insufficient, and failing. So obviously, I think it's super cool. Hopefully you do too. So let's dig into each and every component here. Cultural alignment and engagement. What the heck does she mean by that? When you take the quiz, the recommendations are 51% of the US workforce are not engaged. And if you add on top of that 76% of the people who are working for you are either open to or actively engaged in leaving you, then cultural alignment and engagement is huge. It's really one of the most important things, but as Anne said earlier, only 11% of companies surveyed are happy about their culture and their engagement. So some of these tools we're designing here at TalenTrust, and I know our Vistage friends in the Research Center have just put out this super fantastic report on culture. And my friend Gustavo is one of the subject matter experts quoted. I got to tell you, it's a great tool to read and use along with our talent and culture roadmap and our quiz. In the absence of information, we make up our own stories. Get educated about cultural alignment and engagement. You want to maintain a strong culture because Gallup says that 27% of workers agree that they believe in their organization's values, but they don't know how to live them. So what do? The first step in increasing employee engagement is understanding your baseline. You're never going to have 100% of the universe totally engaged in everything that you're doing. Let's not go for 100%. Let's go for 75 or 80%, okay? So let's establish a baseline of where people are and how engaged they are. So best practices are measuring what matters on 90-day cadences. So to make sure that you're informed what the health and wellness of your organization from an engagement and cultural perspective every 90 days. For some of you, you're like, how can I do that every 90 days? Well, you can use a tool like our talent and culture report card. You could use some other tools as well. And I'm going to show you some of them. So Burson, Josh Burson, he's an actual human being. He talks about the 5 elements of employee engagement. And these, I got to tell you, are not rocket science. They're just not. It's meaningful work. It's a positive work environment. The ability to grow if I want to, because guess what? Some people don't want to grow. Trusting that your leadership is going to tell you the truth. And we have to demonstrate as leaders that we're going to tell the truth again and again and again. And some hands-on management. So looking at those factors as far as where you are on that scale is important to create positive engagement. Again, you're never going to have 100%. Research indicates from Josh Burson, who used to be part of Deloitte, that these 5 elements are absolutely critical in driving engagement. It's not one thing, it's everything. So how are you going to, I'm sorry, that's my phone. How are you going to make sure, I tried to turn everything off, people, sorry, I'm imperfect. How are you going to make sure that you provide meaningful work to your employees, a positive work environment, and make sure that your employees are absolutely engaged in the work that you're doing? So that's key. The other thing that I wanted to point out is some other tools that some of you might have seen before. You might know about them. Gallup is a wonderful organization, and if you don't believe me, you might believe them. The Q12 from Gallup it's kind of a dated tool, but I'm always fascinated that some people don't know about the Q12 from Gallup. And Gallup suggests that you should know these 12 questions about every single person who works for you. Wouldn't that be awesome? The 3 that I love, and I illustrate sometimes when I'm speaking to groups, are is in the last week, have you received recognition or praise for your contributions? Guess what? Recognition is no cost. You have a wonderful opportunity to show people that you care. And if you're not doing it as the business owner leader, your hiring managers aren't doing it. Some of the things I talk about is sending simple notes home to your employees based on work that they've done for you in the last couple of weeks. And also putting a reminder on your calendar to give authentic recognition. You don't want to fake it because people will know you're faking it. But you want to make sure that you remember to give recognition and praise because you're busy. So think of unique ways, and also ask your people. This is really part of it. Ask your people how they want to be recognized, because not everybody wants to be called out in the middle of a team meeting, right? So make sure that you are giving recognition and praise the way people want to receive it. That's the harder part of recognition and praise. The other piece that I wanted to point out to you, the other question that I like a lot is, do you have a best friend at work? And some of you on the call just thought to yourself, who cares? Well, you should care, because there was an article in Inc. this morning, dated October 8th, about work friends. Work friends are really important, not because they have a buddy at work necessarily, but they're building community. So if you want to write this down, write down Inc. this morning, October 8th, 2019. It's an article by Bill Murphy. He's the contributing editor for Inc.com, and he really dissects this number 10 question. Do you have a best friend at work? Here's some cool statistics that when people are attached and have friends at work, 84% of the respondents say a job can't truly be great unless they have great coworkers. 67% say they at least have one coworker that they consider a great friend, a close friend. And 41% said they'd left a job because they didn't like the culture and they weren't attached to anyone in the organization. And here's the most important statistic for all of you to think about. 36% of people surveyed say they would take a pay cut, make less money if they didn't like the culture. Isn't that astounding? It's a lesson for all of us. It's not all about the money. Money is about the fifth reason people choose your company to work for. The most important piece is people and the culture and the way they are experienced and whether or not they get recognition. Recognition is the number one reason people leave you and quit you, and it's also the number one reason they stay. Not earth-shattering, but just reminding you of how important these things are in our work life. And especially this time of year, we're all busy. We're trying to get the Christmas tree up, the Hanukkah decorations up, or just trying to go take a break, whatever it is for you. Remember to stop and show some gratitude and recognition to people who you work with. The next tool that I want to introduce really tied to this employee engagement piece. Remember, we're still on factor number 1 out of 9, that cultural alignment and employee engagement, and it's the most important piece. You can also ask your team your Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score became, kind of famous or popular by Harvard, and Harvard's a pretty cool institution. I used to hang out in Boston and Cambridge. So again, they're subject matter experts. They believe that you should ask a certain question to your customers. That question is, how likely are you to recommend our products and services to a friend or colleague? Now turn it into an Net Promoter Score. And here's the question. So write this down. How likely are you to recommend a friend or colleague to work for our company, and why? And so people rank the company and answer that question qualitative and quantitatively. So they give you on a scale of 0 to 10, and they also answer the question and why. So you get some really good data, and it's one question. I don't know about you, but in this world where we're so busy, 12 questions could feel overwhelming with the Q12. But one question could feel a little more manageable. Now note, if you give people, if you get answers on a scale of 0 to 10, this is the formula that Harvard has engineered the Net Promoter Score around. So if you get a 0 to a 6, they're detractors. So there might be the 76% that are either open to or actively engaged in leaving. Then you've got passive people that, don't call me out, just let me do my job. And then you've got the 9s and 10s who are the promoters. So where is your company? Wouldn't it be great to know this? As you grow your company, as you add new people, it's the one question that I love the most out of all of the data that I've ever collected over the years that I've been doing this. It is qualitative, it's quantitative. You can measure trends over time. Because remember, I told you the 90-day cadence is very important when you're capturing employee engagement. So I think I've given you enough on the cultural alignment. I've given you a quiz. We have the report from Vistage. And we're going to jump in now to leadership development. So managers sometimes feel threatened by talented people, believe it or not. And so managers have some training in leadership best practices, but there's not enough systems and processes to ensure consistency and employee development. I have a great friend. He's a wonderful business leadership coach. His name is Mark Hyatt. And he has developed this, game plan leadership organization. And here's some really key recommendations from him and from other thought leaders on leadership development. Keep managers actively engaged in coaching and development. If you go back for a minute, there's a question here I like on Q12. It's number 11. In the last 6 months, has your manager talked to you about your progress? So tying your managers into making sure they're actively engaged in coaching and development is really a key part. Only 21% of employees feel strongly that their performance is actually managed. And one of the leading causes of employees' lack of motivation is there's misaligned expectations, ineffective or infrequent feedback, and they're just confused as to what good looks like or bad looks like. The other key recommendation here is maintain effective and consistent communications with employees. U.S. workers find that 1 in 3 employees are considered quitting their current company due to frustrations over internal communication. Now think about that. 33% are open to quitting because they don't know what's going on. So internal communications is really, fancy language for tell people what's happening. Be as transparent as you can. And there's still going to be confusion. I had a meeting yesterday with my very own company, who I love dearly, and we're going through some really good, exciting changes. But one of the phrases I heard from a really great engaged employee is, excited nervousness, and change always makes people feel unsettled. So in the absence of information, people make up their own stories. You don't want your great employees making up the wrong stories. So get smart about sharing with your people what's going on to the degree that you can. Because if you don't, they might be the third that will quit you. And then employee branding. This is like where my happy sales and marketing person meets my happy recruiting person. So this is my happy place, employment branding. It's anybody who's attended our workshops through Vistage. We start with employment branding. So in the quiz, we talk a lot about employment branding, and many companies have no social media presence, which doesn't really make sense in this day and age. You've got to have a social media presence, okay? Let's just get over our own biases about social media, because your audience, your candidate audience, they're on social media. So there's a couple different ways you can attack employment branding. You want to tell candidates who you are and how to find you. 19% of employees think that their company's online presence actually matches where they currently work. I'd say that's a gap, wouldn't you? Also create a fantastic candidate experience. I can't tell you how many times that people don't create a great candidate experience, and then they wonder why people don't accept their job offer. There's a really cool book. It's called 13 Exciting Employer Brand Statistics for Ambitious HR Marketers. I'll say it again. 13 Exciting Employer Brand Statistics for Ambitious HR Marketers. It's by Rachel Burger, B-U-R-G-E-R. So download that so you can actually engage your candidates. Next, proactively manage your social media presence. Everybody hates Glassdoor, right? Well, it's just like Yelp or TripAdvisor or any other tool. And people tend to engage when they're either really, really excited or really, really pissed off. It's a polarizing event. Well, how are you managing your Glassdoor? Do you know for free you can own your Glassdoor page? And if somebody goes on there and hijacks your brand and says you stink, you have to get into the conversation and say, no, we don't. Now, obviously, you don't want to battle on social media, but think if an employee that was let go, or an employee who didn't quite fit your values, leaves of their own accord and goes on and hijacks your brand, your employment brand, and you don't even participate in the conversation, people are going to make up their own stories. Your silence is a message. So don't be silent when it comes to the very core and culture of who you are. Next component I want to focus, employment brand, just to define it for you, is really not about, it's less about culture, it's part of culture. So here's the definition of employment brand. Employment brand is the character and personality of your organization. It's what makes your organization unique, and it is the sum of your values, your beliefs, your behaviors, your traditions, your interactions, and your attitudes. Culture is really part of values. And if you read the report that Vistage Research Center and my friend Ann and Joe just put out, it will totally support this definition of employment brand, which is a huge component of, of culture. And it really needs to be aligned with leadership development. The next factor I want to talk about, which is near and dear to me, is also strategic recruiting. This is something that we assess for you on the quiz, and what is your readiness for it. I have a lot of material about strategic recruiting because it's kind of my little happy place. So I might jump around a little bit here, but strategic recruiting is very important. It's basically, what kind of strategy do you have around recruiting? Develop and maintain candidate pipelines. And look at this person again, who I think very highly of, clearly. He has put together a talent acquisition maturity ranking. Level 1 is reactive. Oh my God, Joe quit on Friday. What am I going to do on Monday? Level 2 is standardized recruiting. You have some processes in technology. They're standardized. Recruiters have some strong relationships, but you're beginning to manage your brand, but you're not quite there yet. Level 3 is talent acquisition is fully integrated with HR and talent management functions. Organization is effective and has successful social media campaigns. And then level 4, the Mecca, strategic enabler. Talent acquisition is a strategic enabler and partner with the business. They have a seat at the table. Everybody knows that without people, they can't win. It is completely engineered through technology. There's AI involved. There's a chief people officer who reports to the CEO. So where are you? Write down on a piece of paper in front of you, are you level 1? Are you level 2? Are you level 3? Are you level 4? And don't lie, because I can see you. Just kidding. Just write it down on your piece of paper in front of you. And so I want to share with you where the rest of the universe is. You're probably, if you're like most companies, around a level 1 or 2. And I know you Vistage members, you're not a 1.5 or 1.3 or 3.2. You're either a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And almost 65%, 60% or greater of companies are hanging out in level 1 or 2. So don't feel bad if you're level 1 or 2. This is not easy stuff. And that's why we talk about good systems and processes in all of our workshops. So the next thing, obviously traditional recruiting is broken. And we tend to delegate it to HR, and I love HR people, but they're not typically sales and marketing people. We need to get really strategic about recruitment as a sales process. I'd like you all to adopt this methodology of building a great employment brand, filling the top of the funnel with leads. This is leads of candidates, not leads of your prospects. Then engaging those candidates, using assessment tools. We talked about that earlier. Having a productive candidate interview where you're actually respectful and you're prepared for the meeting, and then not blowing the offer once you get there. Let me unpack some of these fairly quickly so you get some really good meat and potatoes on strategic recruiting. Lead generation really is about filling the top of the funnel with the people, the candidates that you actually want to work for you, not the post and pray methodologies that many of you probably have. You need to fill it with a ton of leads and research and harvest people from tools like LinkedIn or Indeed. But this is targeting the audience, the 70% of candidates who are not ever going to post on an Indeed Career Builder or Craigslist ad. You want to research and harvest from job boards and aggregators like Indeed. You want to look at industry boards, trade organizations. You want to reach out to people. You want to leverage your introductions to fill the top of the funnel. Next, I want to share with you candidate engagement. Candidate engagement is important because once you've put them in the top of the funnel, how are you going to get them to talk to you? So you want to track leads. Are they quality leads or yucky leads? I mean, do they have any kind of, and they're not yucky people, they're just leads, right? But could they work for you ever? So make sure you're always qualifying them. Develop some relationships. How can you develop relationships over time? Email, texting, phone calls, lunches, invite them to an open house. Make sure you tell them who you are. Sometimes it takes time to court someone. Think of candidate engagement as a courting process. Many of you have courted someone before. Think of candidate engagement as courting the candidate. You want them, make them feel wanted. Candidate engagement is about making people feel wanted. And what are you doing to do that? The next factor I wanted to point out is candidate screening and assessment. I really encourage you to have a well thought out KPI tool or scorecard when you're interviewing someone. And really, this candidate screening should be about 15 or 20 minutes, no more. And you jump on a call or you jump on a video call, which I prefer, and you go through your scorecard, your KPI tool, to make sure that the candidate you're talking to has the really top level skill set for you to put the time, effort, and energy into an interview. Then and only then do you reach out with a predictive assessment, and I have a whole section on assessments that I'll talk to you about. And from there, you can get more data on their thinking capabilities, their behaviors, and their top interests. Next, the candidate interview. I got to tell you, people blow it at the interview all the time. They spend less than 5 minutes preparing for the candidate interview. They run into an interview without even knowing who they're supposed to talk to. They haven't looked at the resume. They haven't looked at any of the work product if they've cared to get it. And they're disrespectful to candidates. This is where your hiring managers need a lot of help. They need to know how to conduct a behavioral-based interview, and most just don't. They need to know what work product is, and they need to know what to look for and how to actually review the work product for accuracy for your culture. And make sure you follow up and make sure you review the assessment results with people. And last but not least, I told you earlier, I have an article on Don't Be Cheap. Make sure that you're comprehensive about the compensation for that position in that geographic area for the size of your company. And don't be afraid to negotiate. Everybody should negotiate with you on their compensation package. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is to leverage time. It's not all about money, people. What can you leverage other than money? And I think time is a great equalizer in our negotiations with candidates. Okay, so the next component I'm going to jump into out of these 9 factors is assessment for fit, which ties really nicely with what I just talked about. So in the quiz, we often find that most people are just not using assessments at all. They've tried it once or twice, it didn't work. They really they haven't had a good experience. And I don't know why, because there's some really awesome tools out there. So here's some of my recommendations. Assessments measure potential and they're predictive. And it's really important that you know predictively, if I'm hiring somebody in a sales role or an accounting role, how likely is this person to be successful? How likely is this person to be engaged in the role that I'm trying to hire them for? And get started by using assessments with your current team. That's where you start first. Usually I see people get sold a bill of goods and somebody comes in and they start using assessments for hiring. You got to start with your current team because you have to know what good looks like. You have to benchmark, and you have to really understand what the assessments are telling you before you start using them in selection. Because there's two ways to use assessments. One is for selection, but more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, you can actually use assessments to manage people really well. So hire and promote based on data. Assessments give you data versus gut. I'm a big data metric driven girl versus feelings. Now I have feelings, but I want you to make data driven decisions. That's what Vistage is all about, right? Take the guesswork out of hiring. Make sure you use predictive assessments. And these are the three that we recommend. Profile XT by Wiley, the Predictive Index, which is also a national sponsor, I believe, of Vistage. Great group. Mike Zaney runs that organization. And then Preview is one we personally love here at TalenTrust. But regardless, don't sit on the sidelines when it comes to assessment tools. They are a low cost, not high cost proposition, and it can give you better data in hiring your next person. And more importantly, it can help you manage people to their fullest potential. That's what I love most about assessments. They're great. And then the next factor, out of our 9 factors from our quiz, candidate selection strategies. So carefully assessing candidates against job requirements. We're in a situation right now where we're at one of the lowest unemployment situations we've ever been in, right? So usually people are just like, well, I have candidates, so I'm gonna make them work. So I want to give you some candidate selection strategies. And the reason we wanted to fill the top of the funnel is so you have choice. Choice is a powerful thing for you, the business owner, business leader, emerging leader, wherever you are in the Vistage community. It's really important. So how you carefully assess candidates against job requirements is important. Career Builder found that 41% of companies reported bad hires in the past year that cost them $25K each. That's a lot of money. You can't afford it. I can't afford it. One of the primary reasons that companies hire the wrong candidate is because they rush the screening process and fail to identify core competencies. Harvard also found that the worst interviewers let their own insecurities and unconscious biases drive the process. And they make bad hiring decisions based on the candidate because of their own insecurities and unconscious biases. Who's making the hiring decisions for you? So let's teach our hiring managers how to select for talent, for culture, as well as the skill set for the job. There's so many different tools out there, and yes, TalenTrust does offer some interview training and also selection strategies. But if you take the quiz, we'll also offer you some tools that you can go educate yourself about. I'm all about giving you great content so you can help yourself. You might not even need us in the long run. I want you to be educated about the tools out there so you can make better selections. The next factor is effective onboarding. Once you get them, what do you do with them? That's what onboarding means. So you need to provide a new hires a structured path to productivity. Sometimes organizations with standard onboarding are 50% greater productivity from new hires. So if you have a good onboarding program, you're going to be 50% more successful. That's what that means. And most of you have an orientation program. Great, I'm glad you do. But do you have a 6-month fully executed onboarding plan? That is the best practice. So integrating your culture and employment brand in the onboarding experience. Because we all know that there's some unwritten rules in our organization. Let's not have our new hires guess at what they are. The next element is systems and processes for efficiency. There's a lot of automation out there, and I don't want you to over automate the people process, but use some. There's some really good tools out there that I'd like to bring to your attention. And there's great recruitment tools and engagement tools. Some of them are covered in the Feedback is a Killer app by Josh Burson. I've said his name now 3 times, so you should write that down. Also using tools like applicant tracking systems. Our friends Amplify, who have been a sponsor of Vistage as well, they have a really good engagement tool. Also, Tiny Pulse is a wonderful tool. And if you want, I have a whole list of systems and processes that you could invest in. And then obviously having tools around that candidate engagement and to automate that is important as well. The next factor is compensation analysis. And again, if you take the quiz, you'll get a report card just for you. You can maintain strategic compensation philosophies. 19% of job seekers report that compensation is a #1 factor of leaving their job within the past year. So it's a small percentage, but it's important to pay attention to. Everybody needs to have a happy life, and you need to make some money along the way. So compensation is about how do you value me? So make sure in your pre-screening, you're asking what their magic number is. And watch out, because in many states, you're not allowed to ask people's compensation history anymore. So I just was in California, and one of the members, Vistage members in California, didn't realize that they couldn't ask, so tell me about your compensation history and give me your W-2s. Just big, huge yellow flag, red flashing lights. Here's the question you ask about compensation history. You can't ask about compensation history anymore, but you can say, tell me how you came to the number you'd like to be compensated. Help me understand how you calculated that. And I highly encourage you, depending on what state you're in, to have a really good relationship with an employment attorney and test your questions around comp with them, because the new comp laws are coming to a theater near you. So also go to my website, TalenTrust.com, and download the article, Don't Be Cheap. It'll be very helpful for you and help you retain people, because some people like to hire people at a lower salary, but it'll bite you in the butt when the economy gets better, or when another suitor comes, another company comes and offers them market rate. So don't be cheap when it comes to compensation. Get educated. We have a tool called Pay Scale. You can have it too. So there's all kinds of tools out there to educate yourself on what the best kind of comp looks like. We are in a war on really trying to retain our people, and as my friend Joe says all the time, retention is outpacing recruitment as the #1 thing that you need to focus on, because you've already spent time, energy, effort, and money in bringing people onto your organization. Why do you want to lose them unless you need to cancel them out? So we need to focus on internal communications and transparency, because as Spencer from Zillow suggests, there's a war for talent every day, and we have to re-recruit our employees so they're inspired to work for us. It's a really powerful quote. And what are you doing every day to inspire people to work for you? So I'm going to pass it back to Ann in a second, but I want to share with you how you can get this deck. Text the word People Puzzle, no space, to 44222. So text the word People Puzzle, no space, to 44222. You can book me as a speaker at your next event. I'd love to come to your offices. Also, you can schedule a complimentary consultation, and you can get access to all these webinars. So we have quite a few webinars. and they're on Fridays with Vistage and other sites. So I want you to have the information you need to build a really great culture and engage your employees and retain them. So I'm going to pass it back to Anne, but before I do, I'm going to just say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of you and your families. Here's Anne, and thank you for your time today. I appreciate you all very much. I love this community.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Your passion just shows through. Just want to remind everyone, if you've taken a quiz and you have any questions on the report that you got, now is a great time to submit those in the questions pane. I took the quiz, and looking through some of the results, there's so many resources and statistics in there. Kathleen, one that stood out to me is the idea about organizations' values. It says 27% of US workers agree they believe in their organization's values. And I was recently at an event where someone said that maybe they felt that they needed to update their values. And I thought, values are so updated, but so is it actually updating values, or how do you actually translate those to employees so that they can actually buy in and believe those? Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, I think that's a super duper question, Anne, because it's really, I don't think it's about updating your values, because your values, if you're a business owner or a business leader, they're your values. But the question for me is, how do you bring them to life? How do you actually take a value and bring it to life? Because people say integrity, honesty, blah, 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 blah. And that's great, but how do you actually put those into action? So my recommendation is putting it into action. And if you go on my company website, TalenTrust, 1tinthemiddle.com, you'll see our corporate values. There's 5 of them. And one of the ones I love them all, but one of them is, we do the right thing even if it's hard. And so it just, that could be said as honesty or integrity. But what we have done is we've defined it a little bit more deeply. And every month when our team gets together, Anne, we live those values, and our team calls out other members for living a value. So here's the value, and this is how my colleague lived it. So really, I think it's about bringing them to life versus changing them.
Yeah, so translating those to behaviors and then enforcing that through recognition. I like that foundation. Is there such thing as too many values for an organization?
I think, I'm a big believer of keeping it simple, the KISS principle.
Yep.
So
yep.
3 to 5 is the rule of thumb, the best practice.
Okay, great.
Because people can get their head around it. Some companies have 10 or 12. I really think 3 to 5 people can actually practice and learn and remember and understand.
I was speaking with a member recently who was going to take values, translate them to behaviors, and then connect them to actual job descriptions and performance appraisals, so that it goes all the way through their HR process, that the evaluation actually is occurring based on how someone lives those values. So I thought that was a great demonstration of values.
Agreed.
Yeah. I really liked what you shared about the 4 levels of talent acquisition. And I'm wondering, if I were somebody who's in kind of that HR or recruiting function, or if I'm a CEO evaluating my HR recruiting functions, what are the next steps to go from one level to the next? What are the kinds of things that can do, maybe starting with evaluating the skills of your recruiting team?
Yeah, first thing I would do is take our TalenTrust quiz. Second thing I do is I'd Google Josh Bersin, Bersin. He's got a lot of great tools too. Then I would start with a conversation with my human capital or human resources people to see where they are in their journey. We put out a hiring guide every single year, and I know Vistage puts out some yummy material as well, really good stuff. We need to use that material to open the conversation, because HR has gotten a really bad rap, and I don't want them to have a bad rap anymore. The reputation of HR is Harvard's writing nasty articles about them, Fast Company is. So we need to reinvent the function and give them the tools that they need to be successful versus saying that they're doing a bad job. They're amazing people, but the whole function is changed. It has become a sales and marketing process and the number one priority. You know, it takes time for people to learn this stuff. So stop calling people names and start giving them the skills they need to be really vital and successful in your organization. Sometimes you might not have the right people, and that does happen. But 9 times out of 10, you probably have the right people. You just have to reshuffle the deck and give them some training.
Yeah, that gets to is if you have a good cultural fit in your organization, as long as they're on the bus, you can find a great spot for them. I think that was Jim Collins, is hire the great people and then find a spot on the bus for them, right?
Yes, love Jim and love his work with Vistage.
Yeah. So thinking about that, and then I've heard members say that somebody who's a good fit for the culture, that actually trumps any sort of experience they might have, because you can always train for a job, but you can never train for culture. I love the tools that you brought up. I have a background in talent assessment, so I love the data-driven decisions. Can you talk a little bit about how, if any one of those assessments is a little bit better for assessing not just for a job fit, but for a culture fit?
Well, the tool I like the most is Preview, Anne, because it's really cognitive abilities and also skills. It's that thinking style, the behaviorals and top interests, because, you know, with your background too, people are going to do what they love. They're never going to do what they hate. So I want to know that you love, you know, writing and research, like it's like your happy place. I want to know about me, that I am going to be able to influence people and be in an enterprising role, and be with people. Because if I'm not with people, I have a tick. So I do agree with you. You can. Values, I think it's more values than culture. Values lead and culture follows. So really identifying the values that are aligned with the candidate and the organization. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is assessing for those behaviors and beliefs as well, using a tool. And I really like the Preview. It kind of rolls it all up and it's very easy to use. Predictive Index is a great tool, but it's hard to use. Tools that are over-engineered, people just tend to put at a lower priority. You got to make it easy for your hiring managers to use it and understand it and review it with their candidates and then ultimately their employees. So ease of use is a big deal for me. And I think Preview is the easiest tool to use.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that the assessments can actually then be used by managers, and my experience is that, you know, many of these assessment companies have different reports. You know, now that they're on board, here's some coaching reports for the manager to understand maybe how to mitigate some areas that weren't the top match. Is there any sort of training you'd recommend? Like who takes responsibility for making sure the hiring managers are using that data then during the whole employee's journey?
Well, I personally believe it's the manager of the hiring manager, with assistance from the human capital or HR partners. We cannot dump the employee life journey on HR because somebody else is with them every day. So it's really the human capital people training people on how to use the tool again and again and again and again and again repetitively. People don't absorb from a learning perspective. They don't really get it till 8 to 12 iterations, you know, so it's not just a one and done, check that box. Then from there, the leader of the department needs to value it and use it with his or her hiring managers. So model the behavior, and then then the hiring manager needs to be trained on how to use it with their rank and file. So it's layered. It's like a 7-layer cake. With lemon frosting. Think of a lemon 7-layer cake.
All right. Well, it's almost lunch and now you're making me hungry. I just have one other question in our last few minutes. And, I like the idea about onboarding, and that is so important. We hear from members talk about people ghosting them. They don't show up for the first day, or they're disengaged because it's really, an employees kind of market. One of the components of onboarding, though, should be culture. And I'm wondering if you could give advice to CEOs, like what's their role in onboarding, especially in the area of culture?
Sure. I think that owners and leaders need to be part of the first week, the 5th week, and the 12th week, and then 6 months in. They need to be inserted in the process, whether it be a video call, a note, a phone call, to really check in on the values that are being translated to this new asset, because people are assets. They're amazing. So let's treat them as such. And some of the best leaders in the world made people their most important job. They didn't delegate it away. So I believe, as the owner of my company, it's my job to make sure that my people have the tools and resources, and be really involved in that assimilation onboarding process. Now, obviously, other people are going to have major pieces to onboarding, but how are you going to insert yourself into that process?
That's a good thing for our members to consider, is how do you onboard for culture, and what's the role as a leader in the organization, and not just, as you say, would you say dumping that on HR? So it starts at the top, right?
Absolutely. It starts there and it ends there.
It starts and ends. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for Kathleen. Always a pleasure to hear from you and to have some conversation with you. And thank you to everyone who attended today's webinar. We invite you to join one of our upcoming webinars. And in fact, as Kathleen kindly mentioned a couple times, our report on creating a conscious culture, we're having a companion webinar on Friday, January 25th. Myself and Joe Galvin, Chief Research Officer, and some guest panelists will have a webinar on creating a culture with intention. So we will review the distinct components of culture as outlined in our report. And you can register for that at vistage.com/webinars for a complete list of upcoming webinars, and to register for that one. And that page also has links to recordings of our past webinars. So Kathleen, I know you mentioned that you had quite a few in the library as well, and that's where you can find them. That's vistage.com/webinar. Thank you, Kathleen, and everyone else, and have a fantastic day.